Hello, Arizona. Welcome to this episode of Valley of the Sun Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Jayson Bates, the lender who lives in and is a part of your community. If you want to reach out to the show, then please do so by visiting my website at www.valleyofthesunrealestateshow.com. From there, connect with me on any social media platform, including, I think, maybe Instagram. I'm going to put that on there. I'm not on there yet, but I'm going to put that on there. And if you're listening to this on iTunes, please write a review, as it is one of the only ways that I have to help improve the show. And speaking of which, I am going to read a review that Greg Gonzalez did for me. I worked with Greg many years ago, and so I really appreciate him taking time to write this review for me. Jayson is very knowledgeable about mortgages and real estate in Arizona. I've had the pleasure of working with him in the past and look forward to his upcoming podcast. So thank you, Greg Gonzalez, for writing that review for me. And just a little tidbit, side bit, we share the same birthday. So thank you very much, Greg. Appreciate it, buddy. OMG. All right, cool. So I've got a really special guest on this episode of Valley of the Sun Real Estate Show. His name is Aaron Chonka. He's with Meets and Bounds Valuation Services, and he's an appraiser. And so we're going to talk about appraisals here in the Valley. There's been a lot of movement as far as values go here over the past few years, and getting that fair appraisal can be a little bit of a moving target. And Aaron has been so gracious. He reached out to me, and I really embraced him and really excited to showcase him and all his knowledge for the podcast and for you listeners out there. Aaron has been working as an appraiser in the greater Phoenix market since 2000. He's done over 5,000 valuations of homes here in the Valley. And he does many different types of appraisals. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Aaron, but you do divorce, mediation settlement, date of death valuations, PMI removal, property tax appeals, and pre-listing appraisals. Did I miss anything?
That's it.
All right, cool. Well, thank you very much, Aaron, for being a part of the podcast. And you can reach out to Aaron, too. You can go to his website at www.meetsandbounds, and that's METSANDBOUNDS.net. Or you can call his office directly if you're needing an appraisal. You can call him at the office number at 480-463-6388. All right, cool. So let's get right into this. So the topic tonight, Aaron, how to get a fair appraisal. So there's a lot to this, isn't there? There
really is. And first of all, thanks, by the way, Jayson. Do your podcast for this. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, awesome, man. And we're going to do. We talked off camera, if you will, or off mic, if you will. We want to do a series of these. So for all you listeners out there, please, stay tuned, write a review, and stay tuned, because we're going to have others. Because this seems to be a deal killer, as you put it sometimes, Aaron, right? And so we want to try to negate that, if you will, or try to minimize that, or mitigate, whatever the right word is there.
Absolutely. I have noticed over the years in doing appraisals, the nervousness on the part of the homeowner when I come in, or the real estate agent who I'm talking with, that is just crossing their fingers, hoping that my appraised value supports the purchase price of the property that they've listed or the home that they're trying to sell.
Right.
And so I've really tried to do my best, get information out there that is helpful to the average homeowner or consumer, and then also to the real estate agent community, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about the appraisal process, a lot of things that people just don't have a full understanding of. And so I want to be out there to try and help others and clear up some of the confusion and misinformation.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we want to do. Again, this podcast is all about putting information out there that's relevant to Phoenicians or Arizonans into our market, because our market is a little bit different. And you kind of nailed it. I mean, the appraisal is kind of the anxiety point. I've got some clients right now that are really sweating the appraisal. Not sweating it so much as far as the value, but what else could possibly go wrong. And so we're going to try to answer some of those questions here. And I read one of your articles here, and it really I think really hit home here with me, Aaron, because it says here, the old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I love that. I love that saying. And it's true, as you go on to say here, it's true when hiring an appraiser. Many of the appraisal issues we are hearing of today relate to the quality of the appraiser hired for the job. So let's talk a little bit about that. So tell me, your experience. You've done a lot of these, obviously. So what can somebody do to make sure they've got a good quality appraiser? Because from the lender's perspective, we have these, appraisal management companies, AMCs, that we have to go through. But there are things that consumers can do. And I think this is important because I don't think consumers really understand, what they can do. So let's touch base on those. What do you think?
So I break it down into a 3-step process. And, the reason why I use that quote about an ounce of prevention is most I talk about with people is taking a proactive approach to the appraisal process before the appraiser even comes to even look at the house or even finishes his report. So a lot of my suggestions are about preventing the problem before it happens or stepping in the way before the appraisal is already done, because your chances of getting a fair appraisal are significantly increased if you kind of follow some of the steps that I suggest prior to the appraisal being done than afterwards. When the appraisal comes in below purchase price, there are some things that I can suggest that people do, but it really has to do with what goes on beforehand, because the chance of getting an appraiser to perhaps reconsider their value, the chances go way that happening successfully. So,
okay, repeat that for me because it cut out just a little bit. It goes way down. Is that what you said?
Yeah, so your chances of getting a reconsideration of value, it's less likely to get a reconsideration of value in your favor versus staving off the problem to begin with and getting a fair appraisal ahead of time.
Right.
So one of the things that I suggest right off the bat is for the homeowner or the real estate agent, depending on what perspective you're looking at this from, is to align themselves with a mortgage company that truly cares about appraiser quality.
Yeah.
Now, just to let the audience know, just kind of the way things are done today, based on some changes in financial reform that's come about over the 7 or 8 years or so. Nowadays, the way that an appraisal is ordered is a lot different than what it used to be. It used to be that you and I, Jayson, could have, you as a loan officer we could have direct contact, and you could send the appraisal order to me directly, and because of a trusted relationship, you might decide to send me all of your appraisal orders.
Right.
Well, the federal government saw that as a problem that contributed to the real estate bubble bursting back in 06, 07, whatever it was.
Yep.
So what they sought to do was put a firewall in between appraisers and the loan officers. They didn't want loan officers suggesting or having the appraisers try to hit a targeted value. So what came as a result is the loan officer nowadays send off the order to someone else, and sometimes that's an appraisal management department inside the mortgage company, or sometimes it's a third party that expressly does the job of appraisal management. We call those AMCs, or appraisal management companies.
Right.
And so in the worst case scenario, when an appraisal order is handed off to an appraisal management company, it can be a bit of a random process by which the appraiser is selected. Depending on how the appraisal management company does business, they could be choosing from a roster of dozens, if not maybe hundreds of different appraisers in a particular area.
Right.
And so sometimes the order goes to the appraiser that's willing to do it for the lowest fee and the quickest turnaround time.
Yeah. Yep.
So you can imagine that low fee and more pressure on faster turnaround times doesn't always translate into better quality appraisals.
Yeah, and let me explain that, because you bring up an interesting point here from a lender's perspective, we use the appraisal management company. I legally cannot speak to Aaron directly about the transaction as a loan officer because I'm compensated based on whether or not that loan closes. And so the government came in and said, hey, because you're directly compensated, there should be an unbiased opinion as to the value or the market conditions for that particular property. So we need to put this middleman in place. Now, that's all well and good, but when you talk about the cheapest, it starts to put pressure on price, because when you put a middleman in, then it gets more expensive, right? It's just the way it is.
Absolutely.
And so then people say, well, wait a minute, Aaron, before, in 2006, 2007, 2005, appraisals were $350 to get an appraisal. $325, $350, maybe $400, $500 for a jumbo. That was pretty much the going rate. Now, you're starting out at, close to $500, maybe $450 or $500, because of this middleman. The appraiser isn't making more money. It's the middleman who's making the money. And so it has put this pressure on price. And then, some appraisers, quite frankly, have gotten out of the business. Some of the good appraisers have, said, hey, this is just too much. I'm out. Sorry. And so it has put pressure on you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's put pressure on you to perform. And so now you have even more people with fewer appraisers. I mean, I just saw an article not too long ago about the shortage of appraisers, good quality appraisers anyway. The shortage and turn times have suffered as a result as well.
Absolutely.
So,
yep, these are all things that we're facing: increased costs to the consumer and shortage of appraisers.
Yeah, and that also, because there are fewer appraisers out there, I think it kind of goes into what you're probably going to say next, which is getting the right appraiser for the right job. In other words, I've seen it here where I work and other places that I've worked, where appraisers travel great distances to go do an appraisal. Mm-hmm. Now, I think that's a little twofold because of the shortage of appraisers, number one. Number two, there's some laziness on the management companies to search out an appraiser that is for that market area. Maybe they don't want to, maybe they're time constraint, whatever the case may be. I call it laziness. And then thirdly, that there is just a shortage of those appraisers out there, good quality appraisers out there. So that I want you to touch base on that a little bit, because consumers have some certain rights here when it comes to appraisers. I think too many times the consumers say, hey, you order the appraisal, I'm done. Okay, I guess I just take it and, let the chips fall where they may, right? But that's not the case.
Yes.
Consumers have some rights.
Like I said, for the homeowner or even for the listing agent or the buyer's agent, be proactive about this situation, because I've read Dodd-Frank, which is the financial reform that relates to the guidelines that appraisers and real estate agents and lenders are supposed to follow as it relates to the typical mortgage transaction. Mm-hmm. And what I think is surprising to a lot of people is to find that there's a great deal of latitude, a great deal of communication that is allowable within the framework of these new laws that we're working under. But basically, the only thing that it really prohibits being done by any of the parties involved is they're just not allowed to try and direct the appraiser towards a targeted value or try and bribe them or intimidate them into hitting some sort of predetermined number.
Right.
Other than that, when it comes to a particular property, the consumer or the agent wants to make sure that the agent is going to listen to their needs. So if they have a particular property in an area, maybe one of our historic districts here in Phoenix, or perhaps it's a lakefront property or golf course community, then they want to be sure that they're being ordered from an appraiser that is familiar with that area. We call it geographically competent.
Yeah, I like that.
And so it's well within the rights of the homeowner and or request an appraiser that knows the area well. So they just need to be familiar with the mortgage company that they're working with, get to know what their ordering process is, and then talk to the mortgage company about getting someone that is perhaps either lives or works close by to the subject property.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring this up because I have the right as a licensed loan officer. I can put notes in the file when we order the appraisal through the appraisal management company. I can put notes in the file as to some instructions that we would like to give the appraiser. So, for example, we'd like for the appraiser to contact the agent or meet the agent at the time of the inspection. So the agent may be able to give documentation, upgrades, whatever the case may be, comps, anything. Because agents, and this is, I'm speaking of purchase transactions, the most part, or sales transactions. But agents sometimes they represent investors. Investors have put some money into the property, and they want to get some value out of that, and they want it to be recognized, and so on and so forth. Now, in all fairness, there are some things, some investors out there in Phoenix want to build the Taj Mahal in an area that won't support the Taj Mahal. So there's just some things that just won't fly for an appraiser. Yes. However, investors think that, their product is the best product on the market and it's going to sell at the highest dollar. And, they watch these $1 million listings on Bravo TV and think that they're a $1 million producer. Excuse me. So they want to get high dollar, and they'll put a lot of pressure on you to do that. But I think that the kind of the moral here is that as a consumer, when an appraisal is ordered, please tell your loan officer what you want. If you want to meet the appraiser out there, you have the right to meet the appraiser out there. Don't let a lender tell you that you can't do that. You absolutely have the right to meet with the appraiser. You can ask the appraiser questions about the property and kind of the angle that they're coming from. And I want you to go into this because one of the things on your article here, and I'm not trying to talk too much. I start getting excited about some of this stuff, Aaron. But I want you to talk about some of the things that a consumer can ask the appraisal. When you talk about vetting the appraiser, I never, got to be honest, until I read your article, I didn't really think about this, but you're right. The consumer should be asking the appraiser. I mean, interview the appraiser. I talk about interviewing the realtor, in a lot of cases, interviewing the loan officer, making sure that you have the right loan officer and right realtor. You can do the same thing with the appraiser, and it's not going to hurt the lender's feelings. So talk about that a little bit. What are some of the questions that a consumer can ask the appraiser to get some feedback as to whether or not they're competent for the appraisal, the job?
So hopefully the appraiser is giving either the listing agent or the homeowner a call to set up the appointment to do the appraisal inspection prior to coming out. That's best practice. So in that situation, when you get that phone call from the appraiser to set the appointment, take a few moments just to let the appraiser know that you're concerned about appraiser quality and that you have a few questions. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't really need to be, any sort of interrogation. Try and put the appraiser at ease. He should feel comfortable answering any of the questions that you may have. But again, just as a good rule of thumb, tactful about it.
Yep.
And ask the appraiser, where they're located or where is their office. Now, just to kind of set the stage for maybe expectations here in the Phoenix area, I happen to live in Scottsdale, and as you read my biography, I've done 5,000 appraisals in the Valley, and that entails what is pretty much most of the metropolitan Phoenix area. So I do get a lot of concern that someone will say, well, I live in the East Valley and I've got an appraiser coming from Buckeye or Glendale or something like that, and they're coming to appraise my house. So while that may be a warning flag, it's just a sign that you need to ask more questions. So the appraiser, like myself, could be very well versed in that market area and know what they're doing and know it well just because of their overall experience. But it doesn't hurt to ask. So
Right.
something else that you might want to ask is, well, when was the last time you were in my neighborhood, or have you ever appraised a property like mine? And your property, again, could be something that's a little bit unique. Maybe it's a golf course home, or maybe it's in a luxury gated neighborhood that is superior to other neighborhoods around it.
Right.
Yours might be the creme de la creme, so to speak. You may have some special features in your home. I did an appraisal last week that had an elevator in it. So you've got sometimes you run across some unique features in the house, or
Right.
a guest house, or a property with horse facilities, whatever it may be.
Right.
If it's one of the defining features of your home, it's important to ask the appraiser if they've done that type of property, and how they've done, or when was the last time you were in the area.
Right.
The point of the whole thing is to just kind of keep asking questions about relative to the appraiser's experience and their knowledge of that area, and ask questions until you're satisfied with the answers. If for whatever reason you get the sense that the appraiser just doesn't quite know the area well enough, or doesn't know the type of property that you're having appraised, then it would probably be wise to hold off on the setting an appointment and just let the appraiser know, I'd like to hold off on this. I'll call you back if we're going to proceed. But take your concerns to the mortgage company. And again, this goes back to the type of mortgage company that you're dealing with, and let them know your concerns about the conversation that you had with the appraiser. If you just don't like they're familiar enough with the area, then they should probably work with you to find an appraiser that is maybe a little bit closer to the subject or knows a little bit more about it.
Yeah, and
So those are just some basic things you can ask.
Yeah, and I've got a little story I'll tell here real quick. I had a gentleman in my office here who does a lot of manufactured homes in northern Arizona. He had an appraisal done. It came in, I think it was quite a bit, man. It was like $60,000 or $70,000 short of the value that the consumer felt that it was worth. Went to the appraiser. The appraiser, you have a right as consumer to dispute the appraisal, a rebuttal, if you will, the value. You have to supply proper documentation to why you're disputing the value or the determination that the appraiser came up with, which generally is in the form of comparables or some other type of supporting documentation. And we supplied that. The appraiser didn't budge. And then we looked back through our history of other homes that were appraised in this vicinity from other appraisers. And we came up with other appraisers who came up with higher values than this particular individual did. And so we went back to the appraiser and said, hey, look, how can you be that far off from these other appraisers? And the appraiser kind of clammed up and adjusted the value. He knew he had made a mistake. So
yeah,
it's very important that we, as consumers, and you communicate with your lender. If you don't feel comfortable, please tell your lender, hey, I don't want this guy appraising my house. And then we'll get another appraiser. Not a problem. It doesn't matter to us at all. We just want to make sure that we get the proper value. And lenders, little myth here out there, or urban legend, if you will, lenders don't want your house to appraise very low. They want it to appraise at market value, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. That's what they want. So there is a little, I've heard some rumblings here as of late that, hey, you lenders, you just want to hold back the market, or you want, no, we don't. We want what's fair. We don't want it overpriced, and we don't want it underpriced. We want the fair market value. Now, with that being said, we don't want to influence the market at all. We just want whatever the market will bear. So we want to firm up the integrity, and that's hard for you guys as appraisers. I mean, in all fairness to you, we've seen double-digit increases in value year over year for the past 3 years.
Yeah.
And so keeping up with that is hard. It's really, really hard. And so there's a lot of work that goes into getting those valuations. Okay, so
Absolutely.
as a consumer, ask your appraiser questions. Interview the appraiser. I love that. And I think consumers need to do that.
Before
Yeah.
the property.
Yeah, before they come out to the property. Exactly. And if you don't like them, we'll get another appraiser. No worries. Or have your agent interview the appraiser if you feel comfortable with that. Okay, so that's, pre-screening the appraiser, qualifying the bank. Obviously, if your lender won't allow you to do that, you need to really maybe look for a different lender. No pun intended. Some banks, some of the big banks won't do that, and some loan officers at the bigger banks don't even know how the appraisal process works, which is a little scary.
That's very true. Yes.
So if you're dealing with that, don't always chase that rate. You want to make sure you get the best deal, because these are deal killers. I've had it happen numerous times. When I worked at a big bank, Aaron, I had a deal fall through because of a $200 lien on a property that really wasn't even a lien, and it fell apart.
Oh.
So the littlest of things, the moral of the story, littlest of the things can kill a deal with the big banks. They don't care. You're just a number with them. So keep that in mind. Okay, so now we kind of vetted the appraiser, right? Or going over the rights of the consumer. What are some of the things that the homeowner can do if you own a home? You're getting ready to put it on the market. You put in your article, hey, it's a good idea to get an appraisal, right? And I love this idea here, and I want to share this with everybody, because you mentioned get an appraisal before you actually have a realtor come out and give you value.
Yeah, one of the wonderful things that can work in your favor with an appraisal is, obviously, the whole purpose of it is to have an objective third-party opinion of value.
Yeah.
There's my role as an appraiser is not to come in at a predetermined value just to make the client happy, but rather to give them a solid basis of information by which to make a decision.
Right.
And so some of the advantages to getting an appraisal prior to listing the house is everyone, of course, wants to make sure that they're getting the most money for the property that they're selling, and they don't want to leave any money on the table. But there also is a downside to overpricing your house and potentially having your property sit on the market too long, which can stigmatize a property, meaning that you're going to have to make price reductions maybe even beyond or below market value for your house if it sits on the market for too long.
Right.
So an appraisal can give you some really good guidance as to what the property's worth at the time that you decide to.
Yeah, and it's important to note here, it doesn't mean, let's say the appraisal comes in at $150,000, for example, and a realtor comes in and says, hey, I'll sell your home for $160,000. Doesn't mean that it wouldn't or wouldn't sell for $160,000. But at least gives you a good standing point. If somebody comes in, because I've talked about this before too with some of the appraisers that guarantee a sale within a certain time frame, or they'll buy your house kind of deal. A little bit of a smoke and mirrors, because if you appraise that house at 150 and that realtor comes in and says, hey, I'll sell the home for 130 and guarantee a close within 30 days, well, guess what they're doing? They're just underpricing your home, and you're losing money, right? And then you're talking thousands of dollars, and if they contacted you directly to have an appraisal done, you're only talking a few $100s, right? A couple, I don't know, $400, $300, whatever it is that you charge to have an appraisal done. So at least you have that foundation, you have that starting point, and you can then smell out the realtor who's going to blow sun where the sun don't shine, as they say.
Exactly.
So you can kind of get a good perspective on the professionalism of the realtor when you're asking them to list your home. Okay, so now what other things can a homeowner do to help prepare the home? We got an appraisal.
One of the things that is now required by Fannie Mae with regard to appraisals that are done for purchases or refis is that the appraiser has to detail the property improvements to the house over the last 15 years. So it's very good to provide detailed information to the appraiser with regard to any property improvements that have been done. I say if you've invested, $500 or more in a particular feature, it's probably a good place to thinking in terms of something that might add value to the home.
Right.
So the appraiser, it's very helpful to them to have a list of improvements and the time frame in which they were done. So if it was done, if you did the kitchen cabinets and kitchen countertops back in '08, let us know the time frame in which they were done, the materials that were used, labor costs, and then also be detailed as far as the materials that were used. So if it's Italian marble or Italian travertine or something like that, and it's a little bit thicker than that granite on the countertops is, bullnose. It's a little bit thicker than maybe the typical slab of granite. Be sure to point that out because
right.
ornate detail can sometimes have an impact on market value. So a lot of these homeowners are the type to put stuff in an Excel spreadsheet and have everything laid out as far as every penny that they've spent and every company that they've used and have all the receipts and stuff. To be honest with you, it sounds like that might be too much information, but it's better to have too much than too little. So
yeah.
At least when the appraiser comes, have a pretty, doesn't have to be specific down to the penny, but have a nice supportable round number that shows the total of investment in improvements to the house. And that way the appraiser can incorporate that into their report and show it to the bank underwriter so that when, for instance, if the appraiser makes a $50,000 adjustment for remodeling in the house, but the homeowner can prove that they spent $100,000, well, that makes sense to an underwriter. When they can see that listed out and there's photographs of the improvements in the report along with a breakdown of costs that the homeowner spent on improving the property, that all makes sense to them and it's easy for them to sign off on. But when the appraiser makes these adjustments and doesn't give much support for why that was done, that's when questions arise and problems happen in the appraisal process. And so in order to avoid that stuff, it's best to present all of this information at the time that the appraiser visits the house.
This is the one area where too much information is not a bad thing.
Right.
Give everything you can, because you're absolutely right. We've had situations where, especially in flip properties, investors purchase the home on the courthouse steps. They put all this money into it. The market hasn't really caught up with the value of the home. Yet the investor says, "Hey, look, I dumped $75,000 into this home. Therefore, it's it's appreciated more than 120, 150% of the original acquisition cost, and you have to justify that increase in value in such a short period of time." And having all this documentation is imperative because the underwriters will sign off on that provided it's justified. So, because you got to remember, the underwriter doesn't see the home prior to these improvements. They only see it at the time of the appraisal. And so they got to understand where it was to where it's come. And, having that documentation helps bridge that gap there. Now,
absolutely.
The other thing too, Aaron, that I think is important, because I get asked this all the time, especially from busy homeowners, taking kids to soccer and family events and all this kind of stuff. Does my house have to be clean? So I want you to touch base on that a little bit because, I've got my own thoughts about that. So I wanted to come, get your perspective on it.
Well, I think it's not a bad idea to make the house look as presentable as you possibly can for when the appraiser comes. However, it's understandable that we all lead really busy lives. And like you said, we've got to take the kids to soccer practice. We've got to take them to school. We're doing recitals. We've got our own businesses. Things take us in a lot of different directions. And sometimes the house doesn't get spick and span clean prior to when the appraiser's there. So a little clutter or a little things being disheveled is not really of concern to the appraiser. For the most for the most part, I really believe that me and most of my colleagues are pretty good at looking past, things being out of order.
Yeah.
But it's when there's something structurally wrong with the house, or there's something that affects the integrity of the property, perhaps like a leaky roof and there's water stains on the ceiling, something like that.
Yeah.
That's when you get into something that starts to affect value. So, yes, try to have your house looking presentable. It could only help you, but then again, don't get too caught up with having, everything look model home perfect.
Exactly. And I'll say as a tidbit to that, I haven't seen this too much lately. Maybe you've seen this, but early in my career, I would see a lot of people who would fill in their pools with junk and then pour dirt in over it. And sometimes those things, depending on what the material is that you're filling in these pools, can be considered hazardous material. And the appraiser would give a cost to cure to clean it up. So if you're going to have these sort of things, engine blocks in your backyard or, stuff that could be considered hazardous material, clean that up too, because the appraiser will make note of that. And no lender wants to take over a home that has any hazardous material associated with it. So we'll have to be cleaned up.
That's especially true if you're seeking FHA financing, because FHA has a set of guidelines that are above and beyond what Fannie Mae appraisal guidelines would be. Mm-hmm. And so if you're trying to obtain FHA financing, anything on the property that could be considered a safety hazard or something that affects the structural part of the house or the sanitation of the house is going to be noted in the appraisal report, and it's going to be a closing condition that needs to be
fixed.
It's going to need to be fixed before you can close on. So even simple stuff like a broken window or broken railing on stairs or carpet that's perhaps a little bunched up where it's stretched out a little bit, that could be a tripping hazard, or holes in the carpet. Or I even see switch plate covers that leave the wiring behind the walls exposed. All of this in FHA, in their eyes, is viewed as something that could be a safety hazard. So even those little 50-cent fixes need to be taken care of before the appraiser comes out, or at least be willing to do them if it's something the appraiser catches that you didn't notice. But that's probably a whole other show right there that we can
that's a whole other show, because and I get this all the time. It's like, hey, well, then, because I say, hey, I'm sorry, but the appraiser is going to have to go back out there and sign off on it, because the appraiser will give me the value pending these things being fixed. Well, the only person that can sign off on those things being fixed is the appraiser, which means I got to send the appraiser back out there, which there's another trip charge to that. And when we are talking price sensitive, somebody's got to pay for that additional trip for the appraiser. So, it's just better off to just, walk through the house and get that stuff cleaned up beforehand.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. So, we've gone over a lot here today, right? And I know there's probably a lot more, and we're certainly going to continue this conversation because I really enjoy this subject, and I think it's one of those things that we as consumers just kind of take for granted and don't really know our rights or our, where we can go with it or what we can do. We just kind of accept it. It's like a period at the end of a sentence. Okay, appraisal. Okay, it came in low. Okay, now what? I guess I'm stuck, or this and that. They just kind of accept it. Bottom line moral, hopefully, that everybody takes from this is that you as a consumer do have rights, and you can talk to the appraiser, and you can give them information. You can't really influence the appraiser. However, you can give them information that could help with their assessment of the value of the home.
Absolutely.
So I think now, do you have anything? Did we miss anything, Aaron? Did we cover everything? How are we doing?
Probably the only other thing that I would add to this topic today is beyond the homeowner providing information as far as the property improvements or the agent doing that, I suggest that the listing agent, or even if it's the buyer's side that wants to meet the appraiser at the property at that time, I obviously suggest that they take advantage of that time and use that time to pass along the homeowner's information as far as the features that they've done. Also, the agent should talk to the appraiser about multiple offers on the property. If there's been a bidding war on the home, that needs to be discussed. And then they also need to talk to the appraiser about the comparable properties that they selected when they came up with their rationale for the list price. So be sure to give your comps to the appraiser and any no comps that you think kind of make those the best available. Explain why to the appraiser, why you chose those. And then along with that, give them the homeowner's breakdown of costs and improvements. And then finally, a copy of the purchase contract with all of the counter offers and addendums attached. So make sure that the appraiser is fully knowledgeable what the final sale price is on the house. Those are the things that I call the appraiser packet. So for all the agents out there, have that ready for the appraiser and be ready to discuss all that information when he comes out there.
That's really good advice. And that's with that being said, I think that will get us on the path, or them on the path, or everybody on the path to getting that fair appraisal that we all are seeking. Yes. So I think that pretty much sums everything up, I think. I think we're good, right? So we're going to continue.
Absolutely.
We're going to have other conversations about appraisals because this is this isn't as simple as one may think. When it comes to appraisals, and we'll dive into some other episodes here, so stay tuned for those. Again, if you're listening on iTunes, please write a review, as it is one of the only ways that I have to help improve the show. So really appreciate if you could do that, and if you want to reach out to me, please do so by visiting my website at www.valleyofthesunrealestateshow.com and connect with me on any social media platform from there. Email me, call me, whatever you want to do right there in one convenient location. Aaron, tell everybody again how we can get a hold of you, and please spell out your website because it isn't spelled like it sounds.
Yeah, so it's meetsandbounds.net. That's spelled METESANDBOUNDS.net. A lot of good information on my website, even just for the average consumer or agent who would like to be more familiar with the appraisal process. It explains a lot about that on my website. And then I'm also on LinkedIn, Google+, and then my new Twitter handle is Aaron_Chonka. Any questions obviously can be posted to those sites, and I'd be happy to get back to you via email or text, or through a phone call as well. So all that stuff is on my website. You can get my contact information there.
Beautiful, beautiful. And we are going to do some live streaming too. So do check us out. Follow me on Blab, blab.im. If you haven't checked out that live streaming platform, it's free. You can check me out there, Jayson, JAYSON BATES, just like the motel. And follow me on Blab because I do a lot of live streaming as well. And we'll have Aaron on the show for live streaming. He's a little nervous. I can feel it. But he's going to be a part of the live streaming and be a part of that. So if you got questions, he'll be readily available for that too. So thank you, Aaron, for taking time out of your day to spend with me to do this podcast. I really do appreciate it, man. Your knowledge is just great, man. I really hope that people get a lot out of this episode.
Yeah. Thank you, Jayson. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right, cool. So until next time, I hope to see you guys out there looking for a home soon. Take care, everyone. Jayson Bates, NMLS 220798, mortgage banking license 1796, equal credit opportunity lender. Sound effects provided by soundj.com.